Hey Michael, what's up?
What is going on, sister?
How was your weekend?
My weekend was good, actually. It's the first time that I haven't worked a whole bunch. I didn't work at all actually for 3 days, and I definitely needed that time to decompress because we've all been going hard, man. The whole planet has been going hard, and definitely it was time to take an extended break. And as the weekend was upon us, we got that crazy rain, and I
Hmm.
had some obligations that I was supposed to, that I was supposed to be doing, and I was thinking, oh, if it rained right now, I would totally get a reprieve. And then it poured, and I was like, yes, I'm gonna just chill and do nothing tonight. And then my whole house started leaking. My roof started leaking again. It was
Oh
all
no. People often forget that when you pray for rain, mud is included with the rain. So,
exactly. That's exactly right. That's
yeah.
exactly right. You got to watch out for the mudslides, and I'm not talking about the drink. I'm talking about the straight up mudslides. How are you? How was your weekend?
I'm okay. My weekend was good. My fiance purchased me a ring light. So now I'm going to be working on my background and stuff like that. So you guys aren't looking at my messy apartment every time we do a podcast. So Adam said I'm turning into a professional YouTuber. So we'll link my channels and stuff like that when I get them.
We're gonna link it all together, man. We're gonna plug it into the universe.
That's right.
Absolutely. And forget the backgrounds, man. We're all just living it. We are
Hmm.
here, and this is who we are. So we're surviving it one day at a time.
Yes, sir.
Cool, cool, cool.
I'm excited for our conversation today.
So am I. This is literally like a long time coming. It precedes even having thought about the idea of having a podcast at NYSED, because Miss Nayah Harper is just an absolute force to be reckoned with. And I've had the pleasure of knowing her for more than a minute. And every time I've been in her presence, I felt like I came away a better human being, like knowing more and understanding. And she, when we were thinking about doing this, and you can totally attest to that, attest to what I'm about to say, and so can Adam. And I'm trying not to move, dude. I really am. I'm all about rocking today, so I'm trying not to rock. So she was literally the first person I thought of when I thought about whether or not NYSED could actually pull off a podcast, and that we would interview people that were on the ground doing the work. And and it was like, who would we interview? And bam, she just was right there at the top of the list. So because this is just crazy times, and we were scheduling, and initially we were starting, and then we had to stop because we had 5 weeks of craziness at SYEP. You were there, Robin.
Hmm.
And we still are. That indeed, it took a minute to get her to get scheduled, and here we are. So I'm so totally psyched to introduce you all to Nayah, and to say that Nayah is a NYSED person. She had some time with NYSED in the NYSED ranks. She was an advocate over at one of our peer advocate programs. And then in 2018, she joined the New York Peer Health Exchange as a program manager. And she is primarily responsible for development, management, and growth of the New York program. More specifically, though, her focus is on Staten Island and the Staten Island chapter of the Peer Health Exchange. She has graduated from Howard University with a bachelor's in political science with a concentration in administration of justice and Black politics. Nayah has reserved a fervent, am I saying that right? Fervent belief for the need of social justice through equitable advancement. During her tenure as an undergrad, Nayah worked to develop a community based nonprofit organization that focused on alleviating health and wellness issues against women of color. Upon graduating prior to joining Peel Health Exchange, Nayah served as a mentor with us. She advocated for students' educational needs and abridge the gaps. Coming into Peer Health Exchange, Nayah brings a passion for building equity through equitable, cultured by community engagement and greater access for marginalized groups. And what I think that everybody is going to find is that this woman knows how to bring it, that she absolutely is such a clear voice of the intersectionality of who really needs to be the people that are leading in finding the solutions that matter to us all. So here we are. Without further ado, let us jump into another incredible conversation with people on the ground that is effective expressions. Let us do it, my sister.
Let's do it.
Oftentimes you find that they're learning from each other and with each other in these moments.
Where am I starting from? And how can I grow in a particular direction where I can have more fulfilling interactions?
So, you said that your love language is quality time. How does that relate to the work that you do?
Controversy and disruption is like, I live here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Effective Expressions. I am here today with Michael DeVito and Nayah Harper. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
What's up? I'm so excited.
We are going to have a very riveting conversation today regarding health and what that means to the community. There is a lot going on in the Howard community right now because that is where our guest Nayah has graduated from. So, Nayah, if you just want to talk about the different things that are happening, the announcement of Kamala Harris being in the presidential election, the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman and stuff like that. Two very influential people in completely different aspects of the world. How is it affecting you? So on and so forth. How do you feel about it?
Definitely. I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. And I can definitely say it's a high and heavy time in the Howard community. For me as a Bison, I know for a lot of my fellow Bison as well, starting with just the announcement of Kamala Harris being the first VP, Black women VP, it was really, for me personally, it was a strong toss up. She was actually my commencement speaker at my HU17 graduation. And I got to meet her on the Hill when I interned in Congress. And so she was someone who was tangible, like physically present, and also someone who was, metaphysical at the same time, where I can see myself being much like this person, wanting to work in politics, being influential for and around my community, even though we do not share a lot of the same values or the way in which Kamala has landed in as a prosecutor, even oftentimes as a senator, are just decisions I couldn't imagine making. And remembering, not I'm not in those positions. I haven't even really gotten close to those positions, but I see someone who has been in positions I'm in, with being on the Hill, being heavily ingrained in Black politics, and what that means for classism, elitism, and race as an entire sphere existing around that. While at the same time being a Howard graduate and walking through the halls of Douglas and knowing that there are people before you who you're attempting to take the same steps as. So while the presidential candidates are quite rarely the ideal candidates, because politics has a lot of politicking with a K. I also still saw someone who I could walk in the same footsteps as, even if it was completely different decision making, completely different ideologies. It was still an understanding that I had a model, maybe not in the same way of being a role model, but there was someone who's behaviors I could model to be in those same rooms. And so it was a really exciting time, a really exciting moment for myself, and knowing it was an exciting time for a lot of my friends, my fellow bison, just in the community as I was hearing it. While at the same time, we were all sitting with her politics not necessarily being the best, or what exactly we want to see, or the decisions or thought processes or input that we'd want in this space, and still wanting to see what kind of growth Kamala will have, because there is, strong acknowledgement for where she was as a prosecutor, then going into being a senator, and now speaking it into existence, being the VP of the United States. What kind of growth and development comes with having those higher positions, and also what decisions she can actually make and might not be compelled into, or what growth and information she now knows to make different decisions. Then um, I'm definitely still processing Chadwick's passing. And again, that was another physical and tangible experience, because a year later at HU 18, graduation, when I was watching my best friends walk across the stage on the yard, we actually literally got to run into him as well, my other half of my friend group, and say hi to him, and uh, talk with him for a brief second, actually. And that was actually the best commencement speech I had ever gotten to experience, whether it was me sitting in those seats, whether I had been a volunteer for commencement, or just being able to watch them over the years as I had grown up. And that one resonated with me and sat with me the most. And then there's still that metaphysical piece of like, this person has really carried Black roles and stories in spaces that we have never gotten to see before, and some of us couldn't even imagine. Um, so I'm still in a state of disbelief, and also not necessarily feeling like he has passed, because his spirit still strongly lives on. Like I can reimagine and refeel words. And as I re-listened to a lot of videos I had watched, and even rewatching Black Panther, of course, the next day, just being able to think and feel and understand that his spirit, his words, his livelihood is truly legendary. For me as a Black woman, me as someone who lives and breathes in my community regularly and is intentional about that, and aims to be in the same way that he has been, maybe not again in that same role, but in that same way and methodology and thinking. Um, and really noting like, this person, I got to see a legend, like a living legend, and now I can feel what legendary means in this moment. So I'm still processing, and there will be probably a long time of processing, much like the loss of any of our essentially Black heroes, because we get but so much space to talk about who we are and how we exist. He did that in the most trying time, maybe, of his life, it seemed like. So, really grateful for his existence, and while he was physically here, and what is living on.
So the reason why I jumped right into talking about Howard and talking about Kamala Harris and Chadwick Boseman is because they are very influential people. And I believe that you are well on your way to becoming as influential as they are. You are taking the right steps to doing what you can to change the community. So I just wanted you to weigh in on them. And then I wanted the world to get to know Nayah Harper and to see how influential she is. Michael, if you wanted to weigh in on that, I know you know my Naya personally, so
Yeah, it's so great. Again, I'm sort of absorbing the moment because I've looked forward to this. And uh I think the first time that you and I had a solid conversation was during the early trainings in compassionate systems at the Green Belt on Manor Road, in the rain, in right, and we were standing out in that on that underpass, and we were talking about young people, and we're talking about young people who are, systematically, oppressed, and we're talking about young people who have fallen behind, that don't have access, and particularly around education and employment, um, and that was such a great, um, just unexpected moment where I was like, "Oh my goodness, I thought I knew everyone on Staten Island, and who is this person standing next to me?" And how she's speaking so clearly and so passionately about this. And so to connect that moment to, to this moment, you a couple of times said, uh you used the word metaphysical, which is like, for me is like it's all the rage, sister. And so I am so curious, about how you are connecting that idea of transcendence to like help young people that will hopefully listen to this podcast, that you're using that concept of transcendence to sort of see, visualizing yourself down the road, seeing who you are right now, connecting it to Kamala, your experiences with, your the work that you do at the college. How, because often when people hear metaphysical, they're like, "Oh, like what does that mean? Like, to thine own self be true, and I think therefore I am." Or
Mhm.
tell me what, tell me more about that.
Absolutely. I appreciate you asking because, yes, all the rage for me. And I think that's what I'm working on learning as a leader. Um, in this present time. So for me, it's really your work and the things that you are doing are not just your own. We are in service to other people. I strongly believe that that is either the key or the purpose of life. And so anything that you're doing has impact. And even if you don't mean for it to be so, and then there's intentional impact as well. And I think that when you are being intentional. And even sometimes when you're not, sometimes we land on people and have no idea that we even landed on them or the way in which we landed on them. And your work, your thoughts, the way in which you are breathing life into what exists around us should live on even when you're not there. When you're being a leader, there should be room for someone else to replace you and that work to transcend your physical presence. Whether it is in unfortunate passing, but passing is inevitable. Or the idea that you've moved into a completely different space, different position, or have decided that you're here to watch it now. You're here to observe. You've let bygones be bygones. You've let dreams, ideas, and feelings be what they are, and were as intentional as you could be about the impact that you've had on them. And someone else is able to replace you, or even if that person or position no longer needs to exist, that work and those feelings still need to breathe on. And how are you setting a ground and stone and command in that, for it to continue, whether you are there or anyone else is there, really pushing and moving it along. So making it something that lives and breathes in the clouds, the plums you're picking from the tree, however it is that that spirit just living on, and being very ever present is the metaphysical work to me, and how you move on as well as a leader.
Mm, I think that
So,
we go ahead. No,
sorry,
you
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
no, you go.
I was actually going to ask about her work at the Peer Health Exchange. Um, I know that you are the program manager. And for those of you that are watching that don't know what the Peer Health Exchange is, Naya, if you could just explain what it is and explain the mission.
Absolutely. So, Peer Health Exchange is a national health equity nonprofit organization. What we do is we aim to empower and equip young people with the knowledge, skills, and resources, and we call those the KSRs, to make healthy decisions. And we do this by actually training college students to teach health education in high school classes. The health education is skills based, so it should be transcendent and skills that you develop in one space, you're able to send them and matriculate them over into another space. And we do this with a curriculum that we build in house to advance health equity and improve health outcomes for young people. And when we're thinking about young people, it is the thought of the young people that we're serving inside of high schools and the college students that we are training and working with as well. Oftentimes, you find that they're learning from each other and with each other in those moments, which is definitely my favorite part, if I might add.
What sparked your interest in this type of work?
Definitely. So I'll say that I started at Pure Health Exchange 2 years ago in March of 2018. And so when I graduated college, when I graduated from Howard, um, I knew what I was doing and also had no idea what I was doing. I had been doing what I, going along with my plans since I was 7. I was like, I'm going to Howard. I'm going to major in political science. I'm going to become a lawyer, so on and so forth, and was regularly heavily on that track until again March of 2017. And it was when I was interning in Congress and saw that people were literally sitting there making laws, developing laws, being the decision makers on the laws that attorneys then had to abide by or essentially argue quotation marks over and debate. And I was just like, there's so much here, and I did not realize that essentially policy making and program implementation is how we actually move laws along and enact the change that I was planning to develop and work on as an attorney. And of course, deep in LSAT books in March, it was just like, actually, this is not it. This isn't what I want to do exactly. But I have figured out kind of what I want to do. I don't know what it fully looks like, but I've seen it existing. And I want to aim for that. And throughout Howard, I had majored in, again, political science. I had a concentration in con law and Black politics, and a minor in administration of justice. So, like enacting social justice and being like an equity specialist has been the idea and forefront since I was a kid, actually. And even before I really understood what was actually going on around me. And I think it's some of my mom's favorite stories, which get kind of awkward now that I'm actually doing what I said I'd be doing. It's like, oh, it's here. And so, because I knew exactly what I was doing and knew nothing about how to do what I was doing at the same time, I had told my mother that, um, like the little Gen Z millennial cusp I am, I was like, hey, I'm going to take a year off. I'm just going to work on my hobby and do makeup and just chill out and kind of like figure out what I'm doing. And she looked at me like I had sucked the life out of her, and said, you have a summer. I did not spend all that money on your education so that you can do makeup. You could have stayed home and did that. And like I have my mom, she was never like a ruler. Like it was just like, you know what, we're going with the flow, Nayah. I trust you. And in that moment, she was like, there is no flow here. I'm not seeing the river. Reel it in, reel it in. And so she gave me a summer, and I had a great time doing makeup for a summer and figuring out how to do what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to come home and work in New York. Like that was always the plan as well. And I just didn't know where and how to start. And then I ran into NYSID, which is a Staten Island homegrown organization, a nonprofit. So the New York Center for Interpersonal Development had the opportunity for people to become mentors. And if you haven't noticed, we haven't talked about it as yet in detail, but I love working with young people, particularly young people who are coming from communities and populations made vulnerable, um, because there is so much more room to me there. And it's not out of having that same experience, because oftentimes I even haven't, though I am a woman of color. Um, there's just so much to learn and glean and develop that uh, that really pulls me in. And so I think working with NICE and being a mentor, being able to physically work with young people and talk to them every single day about anything that they were experiencing. And in my mind, it was so high level. I'm like, this is the system that's creating this for you. And to them, it was just like, this is my day to day. And I'm like, and here I am in the back, like, this is why this is your day to day. And so, like, connecting those neurons and being able to explain those things and talk with them about it and how to really come out of those barriers, whether it was systemic or something that was truly just something you're doing every day, day to day, was hard work mentally. Still always is, but the reward is beyond anything that like I can put into words. When you see any type of excel, whether that's them learning about themselves or getting the power and potential that they could always tap into and that they deserved and worked hard for. Especially after you being able to advocate for hours on end, for them to like get the A that they needed or just understand like, no, they may not have made it to class this day, but there was a lot of other stuff that you need to understand that plays into them not being able to make it to class this day, and be cognizant of that and work with them on that and know that it is okay because life does come at you or systems create situations for you. So that's how I ended up in my start at the New York Center for Interpersonal Development. And then I realized that the New York Center for Interpersonal Development and about a couple of one other big nonprofit on Staten Island and a couple of other small ones were here doing so much work, picking up so much legroom because Staten Island's the forgotten borough. And people think that it is a greener grass over here, and a lot of times it is not, which really, really bothered me. So I actually uh, did not want to leave NYSIT at all, but made the decision understanding that I now need to go into the rest of New York City still and make them recognize us in whatever nonprofits they had. So I talked about that. I didn't even do like a 2 weeks notice. It was like a month's notice, in talking about that with my executive director at the community school at Richmond High School. And it was, fully understood. And that made me like feel comfortable in being transparent, but also excited to see that other people do want to see more work living and breathing on Staten Island as well. And in every interview, which was quite bold of me, and my mom could not stand, when I'd come back and tell her about my interviews, I was like, yeah, no. I told them I'm not taking the job or I will leave the job if they don't have something fleshed out for Staten Island within a year. So I'm going to develop and learn their program, and then I'm going to be running whatever they decide to place, like what they decide to put in on Staten Island. And surprisingly, a lot of places were fully on board and completely with that, which was also exciting to see too. And then I got to Peer Health Exchange, and they had already had a small pilot happening at the treaties, and they were already looking for someone to do the work. And they had a lot of people who were in their pipeline from Staten Island already, because they worked with Staten Island volunteers who were at colleges like NYU, over at Hunter very heavily. And that was exciting for me. They were already thinking about it before I had to place it into their mind, and that was less of a workplace barrier. And they were doing an amazing job with the program that they had already had. And recently established a chapter over in Queens as well, so knew what it meant to develop borough management. So I told them that I want the job and like fought for it, and then continued pointing out like what the niches need to be for Staten Island as well. And they kind of let me take it by storm. I was able to collaborate with organizations and meet people like Michael, and work with other people in Equity Alliance of Staten Island, SIPCW, and really point out what community-based collaboration could look like in this nonprofit organization, how necessary it is if we're going to be working on Staten Island. And so that's how I got here.
If there's one thing that I learned, definitely know that life is not a linear journey. You don't go from point A to point B to point C in that order. You go from A to A and a half, B 75 degrees due west, especially coming from two Caribbean parents where my only options were being a doctor or a lawyer, and anything else was unacceptable. So I definitely understand what it is that you're going through. But Michael and I were just talking about this earlier this week. You are always exactly where you're supposed to be at any given time. So
After that,
For sure. Something was standing out for me as you were speaking and sort of connecting your before to you here and now. And also, even just a little bit earlier when you were speaking about your reflections on Kamala, and whether or not you agree with certain decisions that she's made over her career. And you had even sort of said, well, when you're not the one making the decision, then at times it's like you need to have all the information before you can really get a clear understanding of what was required at that time. Uh, what 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 was it? Speaking to that, and then also speaking to, you had said that since you're young, you saw yourself going in this direction. Um, that is landing for me because it feels to me like you've known this all along. And as Robin is saying, here's where you're meant to be. So what was it, do you think, when you were young? What was it about your personality? What was it about the way that you sort of were interacting with the world, that maybe you didn't have certain experiences, yet your ability to see what was happening, and to actually conceptualize it? What do you think that was?
Um, I was and still am known to be argumentative. so that I lean into conflict without a care in the world. Controversy and disruption is like I live here. My skin is glowing off of this. And it's not to create an issue, it's because an issue exists and I'm ready to address the elephant in the room. I'm okay because that means we're going to get somewhere better. Like that elephant is now going to be washed and taken care of, and we're going to be coasting through pretty smoothly now. And it was something that people pointed out to me. Of course, like who even knows the word argumentative when you're like 5 years old? Um, and so I think that starting from, again, very young, like when people say that they started singing or playing instruments when they were 3, I was advocating and debating from the time I could essentially talk, according to my entire family, not just my mom this time. And then I think once I got access to spaces where I could do it in a structured way, or where I was really pushed to, that's when my interest and like understanding of what I could be doing and want to do sparked. And that was definitely in high school. I went to Curtis High School and I was in the IB program, and an amazing program. And Curtis is a top tier school in my heart and in the foreseeable world that I can think of, especially in what we have in New York City. But at the same time, it, much like the rest of Staten Island, is significantly segregated. And there were a lot of barriers, even as a student in a world class honors program, I experienced, because of the way in which social politics permeated it, regardless. And I was, again, A+ student and still arguing with teachers. That was a theme in my life, even in Catholic school, however. You get a little trouble for lying Catholic school. But my familial support was quite handy, and also people in my community who worked in the school, knowing who I am, my character, and again knowing my family, but still arguing with teachers, even though I had pristine grades, and still grappling with the way in which the information I was learning did not land with me, and I refused to do certain work or participate in certain projects because I felt like the curriculum was just averse to the learning that I had at home. And so I'm really thankful for my family teaching me so much, but it created a lot of chasms in what I was learning in my current education system. And so I think that's where a lot of it started, where um, I got really bold to push back to people who are my uppers, um, even when my classmates weren't, and would then have to like, felt like I had to. I did not have to, but felt like I had to then advocate for them as well, because also I was experiencing the same thing, or I could see where it was true. And so once I was pushed into having to do that for myself, and then seeing that I was the person who was doing it, and other people just uh, again, sometimes it's your personality. It is how you are. Some people are not going to do that, just not their character. And that's absolutely okay. You may not lean into controversy, but your contributions to the world are valid in other ways. And so there are people who can do that for you or will do that for you. And it's fine to seek that support, or if we have that kind of stake in ourselves, step up in that way. And so high school, when I got into the IB program at I think 16, I was at that time at Curtis, and I was experiencing just so much more blatant barriers where I was like, there is no reason I should be experiencing right now. Like on paper, everything is perfect, and I'm still dealing with this, that, and the third. I began to get a little more gung ho about speaking out against adversity, barriers, um, the way in which systems are set up, and leaning on those to push for what I thought myself and like fellow people around me who weren't getting the same experience that other people around me were, um, and like push for those things.
Mm.
I know that you do a lot of work regarding young people and their access to mental health education, sex education, and stuff like that. Was there a moment that you had with a young person or a group of young people where you realized, like, okay, well, the work that I'm doing is worth it? Like, they're getting it. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think it was so. A lot of the work that I do is like leading trainings with the health educators and them taking that information and being able to apply it to storytelling, classroom management, anything that they're doing in the classroom around sexual health, mental health, and substance misuse. And we would, of course, lean into health equity. So there's a lot of social justice and trauma informed, equity informed conversations that we have with educators that go into being able to connect those dots, which is kind of going back to what I was talking about at NICID, where they're probably thinking about their day to day, and you're like, this is systemic. And so being able to connect those dots with educators is some of my favorite pieces. And I think we have a training series called Power, Privilege, and Oppression. It's one of our equity centered trainings and a mindset training. And so in those, we talk about communications and populations being vulnerable and what those things look like. And one of them, and in one of them, there's a portion around redlining. And the Staten Island chapter is just a Staten Island chapter. And being a native Staten Islander, I was able to really connect dots for educators who had grown up and lived in Staten Island their entire lives, and talk about redlining, and then have them kind of reflect on their communities and where they were from, and understand that the way in which Staten Island is structured, even on the North Shore, there's a lot of separation and segregation still. And having them kind of look at the communities and think about where they lived and where they came from, and how sometimes they'd never interact with literally 3 blocks down. And a lot of educators literally just, they didn't look at me in a way where they were offended, which was great because I was talking about their communities and my community as well, and kind of pressing a button of like, this isn't the best. And our parents and families have contributed to this. And we need to be cognizant of that. And we became beneficiaries of it, or we literally became the oppressors just by existing in that. And they were really receptive to it, and then a lot of them were able to point out things in their very own communities or other communities. And so I used New Brighton and West Brighton or actually used West Brighton as examples. Another educator came in and talked about New Brighton. um, and then I was asking about a gerrymandering line and explaining what that was, and asking like, where can you find the red line or the gerrymander line um, in West Brighton? And one young lady who actually lives just a block over from Cary Avenue said, Cary Avenue. Forest Avenue is where all of the white people live, and that has a higher economic status. And it looks completely different on Henderson Avenue. And I went to a different elementary school or a different middle school. Whereas PS18, my parents would have never let me go there. And it's actually just right down the block. And she just started rattling off, like connecting dots. And you could tell she wasn't talking to the room anymore. She was talking to herself. And a lot of other people were nodding and then started doing the same exact things and talking about that experience. And just like, I literally, like, pointing out, I did not think about this at all before. And some people, and from a significant amount of these groups of people were people of color. So they were able to identify areas where, like, they had been oppressed, but also still served as the oppressor, where they held a marginalized identity and then didn't. And it was a glory moment, because it was also a very heavy conversation because they were doing a lot of self-reflection and we were kind of picking on each other, like, you live over here, you live over here, and doing like neighborhood wars, but in a completely different way. And it was really exciting to have such a hard and like constant kind of like bad words coming out about your community, and then realizing like this needs to be better. Like, what are we going to be doing about this, and how do we have conversations about this a little bit better? And I think it was just that was definitely my most rewarding moment. And then to learn that that same educator in the room um, became a leader in the cohort of volunteers and led that training the next year with new educators. And it was just a full circle moment.
That's awesome. Actually, as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about what you said earlier about you being argumentative and stuff like that. It's not that you're creating a problem, it's a problem exists. And I think that that's a lot of where the stereotype comes of the angry black woman and stuff like that. I'm not creating a problem. Something is wrong, and I'm trying to voice my opinions and stuff like that. And I think that it's great that you're creating spaces where other people of color can do so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope that's probably like the takeaway for today.
Yeah. So speaking of empowerment, um, because we're trying to this is what we're trying to accomplish here, to speak to those that have been engaging in a way that here are the solutions. You just described for with such detail and honesty and clarity, um, the the pulling off of a scab, um, and really maybe even not so much a scab as sort of the opening up of a reality that gets it's not even glossed over, it's ignored, and it just becomes part of the fabric of what we think is a healthy society, and it isn't. And I wonder how, like that, from that last experience that you just shared, and the nature of the way that shift happens. How do you, as a doer in this work, and this is something that I'm so curious about because I've also struggled with this. How do you then kind of go, okay, like my work here is done. I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna go find some other folks to give some information to. How do you work in that sphere of recognizing like you're only one person, and even with a network, that you have to then like have some sort of trust that it's going to go on, and that you can go on to the next thing.
That is a great question, because that's, I think, this year, and like the big part of growth that I do want to have is knowing and learning that. And so thus far, it has very clearly been, just as I was mentioning, being able to observe. As a leader, you have to know when to step back, and we know that when you step back, it's not going to be the exact way that you did it, which is perfectly okay. There are also still going to be some fallacies, and that's why you're in the space, or you still make yourself softly present to correct those things. And again, back to step one, trying to figure out the difference between the fallacies and a different method. Um, and they could have an equal impact, your method and the other person's, or their impact might be a little bit better and you just think that yours is the one that's working. But oftentimes people build from what's already there, so likely it's going to be something that's getting better. um, so I think it's kind of like leadership serenity. Grant me the um, God grant me the grace to the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can change and the things that I have to accept. But then knowing like what is true and what is fact, and then what is your truth, and letting people pick up their truth and speak to their community and speak life into the work from their experience as well, which are just as valid as yours and necessary. And knowing when to step back and let them lead in that way, and just observing. Trust is never going to be 100%, and it's not certainly not going to start off at 100%. It's more of just the wisdom and knowledge, like knowing that that person or that thing is able to carry what you started or what you yourself probably built off of, and what that experience was like for you as well, and being able to reflect on that not only by yourself, but also with that person. Reflection and feedback is heavily ingrained into PhD culture, which is something I'm so grateful for because I've been able to bring it into my personal life, literally in my everyday. And it's created a lot of systems change for me and the way I navigate things. But it's also just the strongest way in which you can probably lead, revisiting the same thing over and over again. That's what you do with a policy. That's what you do with a program. That's also what you do with your family and friends. You revisit conversations, you revisit experiences, and learn that there's a new thing that's going to come out of it each time. And that new thing probably isn't new. It was something that was sitting there already. You just didn't have the space, capacity, or bandwidth to probably address it. So I think it's really taking that step back, being fine with observing, but then going in and doing that reflection and feedback to then develop that level of trust to say, you go ahead, take on that next wave. I see what you're doing, and I think that you either made it better or you really it's better because you made it your own.
Hmm. May I ask another question? I
I'm
Yeah, you just said like a thousand things. My brain was going in 40 directions. Um, you mentioned, mentioned systems change, and in the context of recognizing just the the full weight of how much needs to change in order for the mental models to start changing.
Mhm,
And the what I was vibing off of was that um like the work is not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon. So if arrive at a particular place, and you think, okay, I got this. um it's not then like, okay, now I'm going to go on and do these other things without ever sort of revisiting. And almost every day I'm sort of saying, if you've been here before, be here for the first time, because you have to be able to think about where you are, not just in the in the like quote unquote reality, also like where you are in the moment, and how things have changed from from maybe the last time you were thinking about a particular thing, or working with a particular population, or trying to help even that one particular person that you've had dozens of conversations with, and you get back to them and you're like, wow, like there was a slip or there was an incredible advancement. And it's almost like, I'm going to be here again, all new, like, let me let me shine myself up so I can think fresh. How does that um how does how do we help more people recognize that, like when we think about systems change, that it's not like you got to go into that mental space, and you got to be willing to like keep checking in.
mhm.
And even how does that relate to like health equity and the work that you're doing with young people, with helping them make a better choice? Because just because I decided to get up and run today doesn't mean tomorrow I'll make the same choice.
Absolutely. That is such a tough question, and I love that it's tough and challenging. I think that it goes back to that point around, as we were discussing, just feedback.
Mm,
When you get stuck, when you're in your own thoughts and in your own understanding, um, that's a great first step. That's a great like way to start getting there, but that's also a good way to get stuck. And it's a shame to, of course, word it. And like when you're stuck in your own world or your own thoughts, but that is a stopping point, and it's also a starting point. You just can't stop there. And so, gleaning feedback and information from those around you is the best way to check back in. And at the same time, there's also remembering like you're not going to be able to touch base with everyone. Okay, so now you have to prioritize who is this impacting the most, who is being the most made the most vulnerable by this, how heavy. It may be two people out of the 12, but
mm,
those two people are being impacted the most detrimentally or the most heavily or getting the most out of this, whichever way it's falling in that spectrum. And it's really important to check in with each of those groups of people and understand like to what degree, to what extent, because again, nothing is finite. The work is never going to be done. You just have to keep doing it. And that will get you further. At the same time, checking in with Robin and Michael and Adam and Christine, being able to check in with these different groups of people who are all having vastly different experiences or maybe some having almost the same, and noting that like getting that feedback from those groups of people, those communities or that one person, you're now checking back in. You checked in with yourself. What did you do? What is my truth? What is my opinion? What am I grabbing? And then jumping out of that and saying, okay, I started there. This is what I got. Is this person aligned? Okay, where are they not aligned? Why are they not aligned there? Are they aligned with this other person? And what was I not thinking about? And it's really important to remember that we're working with each other. We have to work with each other. Even if you are helping someone or serving someone, you're working collaboratively on that project. You're working collaboratively on on anything that you're doing. Like when you are being, you are coexisting. So any interactions that you're having with other people is in partnership, is in tandem, is in meaningful time and quality time, which was my number one on my love language quiz.
Oh
Um,
no.
and I'm saying those things. And so who you're with and what you're doing with those groups of people or that community, because it literally could be that you're not working with people. Um, it's important to check in with them, as you're checking in with yourself, and then go back in and check in holistically and gather a full of a perspective as you possibly can. Because again, I personally believe in spectrums and nothing is finite, but you want to grasp as much as you can and pull and call in.
So I'm glad you mentioned the love language quiz because that's actually what I was going to ask you about next. Love language and the conflict style quiz. So you said that your love language is quality time. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does that relate to the work that you do?
uh, I am an in-person person. I am learning that in this virtual world. Like I actually got a full scale on quality time and a literal zero on physical touch, and they're so like interconnected. So I'm just like I wasn't surprised. My coworkers, we have a like big hugging culture, um, and but also like in working in sexual health, of course, like consent to touch. So of course, people ask to hug, but everyone on my team and nationally probably knows like try not to touch Naya. Do your best not to do it. But I will go and sit in the office and hang out with whoever. And so now I know your work stream. I know what you're thinking about. I know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh my God, this relates to literally what I was doing 2 days ago. Do you want this resource? You want this information? And that's a normalcy in our workplace as well. And something I heavily norm in my volunteer corps as well. As much time as you can interact with each other, do so. So our structure is actually set up by college chapters, and as you already mentioned, like I did borough management. We are the Staten Island chapter. All three colleges, Wagner, St. John's, and CSI are teaching together. And I want to know what community you come from. Like, oh, did you go to this high school? Okay, you're going to go back and teach at that high school if you want to. Sometimes they don't. They didn't have a good experience. I'm like, I'd much rather be a young lady teaching at Eagle Academy. And I don't want to go back to my school. But at the same time, some of them are like, that was my teacher 3 years ago. I would like to be in that class. And it makes the teachers and students feel even better as well. And that's oftentimes the case. And that's that quality time. Like the quality is in that they have that reverence, that relationship. And it's really important in our near peer model. Yes, our near peer model is based in age. Um, but there's also a lot to remember in other pieces of identity and communal experience in near peer as well. And so I think that's the way I personally, and then in the system of our work, in, interweave it into what quality time actually is, and finding out what the quality is and what how much time, because time exists, but it is also a social construct. How are you utilizing that time? What is the quality? What is the stake that you have in that space? That was your teacher, your cousin is in that class. I've actually literally run into one of my cousins in the class, which was very funny. And then he requested PhD in his classes the next year. And so, like, who do you know, and what are the degrees of separation, and how can you navigate them? Because, of course, we remember conflict of interest, but at the same time, your likeness is the people that you see around you, your community. What are they doing? What is happening around me? And that's how you get more access. That's how you get more information. Um, and that's what really the quality comes out of. So I think it just speaks to Pure Health Exchange's near peer model, and how can you make that near peer that quality? What is the quality of the near peer, and how are you utilizing your time, whether it's an hour in the classroom or a training, or just sitting down having a one-on-one conversation, or connecting them to resources in that space.
I think it's funny that you got a 0 for physical touch because I too got a 0 for physical touch.
Oh, nice.
Uh, my friends will tell you that I love and I love hard, but I will love you from a distance. Don't touch me. I'm not a hugger.
Wow.
But it's not surprising that you got quality time because I can see in the passion of the work that you do that there is a strong desire for connectivity in the communities that you serve. So, uh,
Yes, that's
mhm.
the word. Thank you for putting it into a singular sound.
Absolutely. I am curious about your conflict style quiz. And for those of you that are watching, the conflict style quiz is just to see what style of management you do when you have a conflict. So there are 5 styles. There is accommodating, avoiding, compromising, collaborating, and competing. So Naya, if you want to share your results with us.
Definitely. So I actually got a 73% on both problem solver and compromiser. And for those of you listening, if you heard me say anything today, it is definitely the comfortability and controversy. So problem solver, because I'm willing to disrupt the space. So when I saw problem solver, I was like, girl, we already knew that. Like that's what we was doing anyway, because that's how we are. But when I saw compromiser, I was shocked because I felt like I was answering a lot of the questions in a competitive way. So I still got 67% on competition, which isn't far off, and a little surprising that compromiser came out of that. But I think that's maybe in the intentional growth that I've definitely been trying to do, as I mentioned before, in figuring out like what leadership means. And leadership is, of course, in service to others. So being able to hear other perspectives and welcome other people into the space, and knowing that despite what my Scorpio mind tries to tell me, I am not the know it all, and nothing is finite, and I'm not the end all be all omnipotent person that Scorpio me thinks I am. And so I was really excited to see Compromiser as a high level one, but it worked in tandem in like, we have a goal of solving this problem. Like, I don't care if you're uncomfortable. That means you're growing. So like, let's get there. I'm uncomfortable too. Let's get it. Um, and then Avoider was 17%. And I can see the two questions where I answered avoidant, And I was like, I actually never do this. This is just a little bit more relative than the other one that's there. But I was like, I don't think I've ever done that in my life. So like the avoider one made complete sense. And it is feels even more true because it's how everyone around me like kind of talks to me about myself. Um, where they know I'm going to lean into whatever a problem is. And yes, sometimes it's best to let well enough, like leave well enough alone or let bygones be bygones. But I get so worried about avoiding something to the point where you've created a mine in that relationship, in that space, again, metaphysically, and that creates a physical bomb. And that's actually my fear. Instead of upsetting someone in that way, my bigger fear is more of that high level part of like, now there is tension and dissonance and distance or disdain even in that's a lot of alliteration, sorry y'all. It was it just felt like I am scared to upset people, but in a way where like now I've completely upset the dynamic that we have, instead of you being upset in that situation, and it'll be transcendent, it'll transfer over into other interactions and situations we have. And so the avoider did come out of I don't want you upset, at the end of the day. Accommodator, still low level too, 29%, which I'm totally cool with. That'll probably be next year's growth, being a little more accommodating.
I so appreciate that you're thinking about it from that perspective, because, and you would, of course, um, because we're, in many ways, we're a blend of this, and we have this leaning, and then I think that as you develop as a human being and you really start to think about how you interact with other people, you can start to really work to improve your relationships. And this is such a great tool to help someone recognize, like, where am I starting from, and how can I grow in a particular direction where I can have more fulfilling interactions. And it may be I'll be an accommodator for this person for a little while, and I'll be a competitor with this group for a while, and then eventually I'm I'm feeling fulfillment from it, because I'm recognizing that I'm able to sort of move between, and yet we all start in a place. I am such the accommodator. I will bend over backwards. I will, like, wear the brunt of the whole world so that other people don't have to feel badly. You had said something earlier, in just before we started talking about the conflict work, that is jumping out at me, that I'm sort of still thinking about. And you had mentioned in and my understanding of what you were saying was, when we're coexisting, or the recognition of the fact that we have to coexist, is very often sort of like, it's glossed over, it's forgotten, you leave the room, you leave the conversation, you leave you leave the topic. And I guess I was kind of thinking about the current landscape of our politics, and how much is at stake right now, and how I feel like there's a disconnect with people about the recognition of the fact that we coexist. And it's like, I'm going to knock on your door as the person who's running for office, say, and I'm going to talk to you about your issue, and then I'm going to leave, and I'm probably not going to come back for a really long time. And there's something about that interaction of, in that moment when you're coexisting, how do you carry that?
Yeah, I think that's a part of that piece around quality time. What are we prioritizing? And there is very, especially in our current cultural climate, it's easy to be apathetic. Earlier, you talked about people just developing scars, and once you pull them back, if you don't properly heal them, you continue to get a scar. And that scar, and I was just talking about this with a friend, it's really easy to become callous. And I find myself being significantly apathetic as a Black woman, because of the experiences that I've had as a Black woman. I find myself being very apathetic, and I think that's where that piece around just like not wanting to be touched, comes in. Just like my physical, I am very protective of my physical being, and I'm working on who I am metaphysically and trying to allow people to come in, and that requires spending quality time and getting to know who that person is and coexisting with them, finding that common ground, but also finding where we're different and appreciating the differences, not tolerating them, not simply acknowledging them, but appreciating that their difference is is the same as my difference. It is not that they are different from me; we are different from each other, and therefore I am not in the dominant. We are coexisting laterally, and I think when you are put in spaces or in positions where you have just as much bandwidth, or you as a person have developed now just as much bandwidth again because we have scars and calluses and wounds. Um, you lose out on like what is quality to you, what are you prioritizing, how are you constructing your time. And as you mentioned, that piece around just an example of like knocking on the door, and now I've left this person. The more calluses you're getting, the more a person becomes less of a human, and that exists in so many different ways.
Hmm.
You're no longer a person to me, you're a constituent. You are no longer a person to me. um, you are a person of color, and now I'm putting you in this category. I may have said person, I may acknowledge that a constituent is someone who literally has to be a person in order to be a constituent, but at the same time, I'm not acknowledging you as that, like who you are as your physical being. I'm pointing out just this title, this category, something that I've placed you into a box of. That probably really, I think, is as I'm thinking, is starting to go back to me for how we view our parents sometimes. Like, our parents are our parents. And as you get older, you start to realize, like, oh my gosh, my mom experienced this and went through this, and I watched her do that without realizing that that's what she was doing. My mom was a human. And yes, I knew my mom was a human before, but not in that same way. I was not thinking about her at all in that same way until now. I'm 24 and I'm like, you had kids at 24? I couldn't even, oh my gosh, girl. I can't even imagine. I watched you do that. I was the kid. I was there. And so like it's hard to when you're placing someone in a category remembering who they are as a human even if their category is humanistic. um, and I think it takes that quality time. Your parents aren't sitting down talking with you about like how hard it was to maybe raise you. You're the person who's trying to be a congressperson might literally not have the time, but also isn't thinking to get across like who you are as a person and how that aligns with the work that they want to do, or literally how it doesn't align and say, you know what, I might not be the best person like for you. I might not have your best interest to vote, but I'm going to work on getting there because I do want to serve my community and now I know who my community is. And that plays into like what you have the capacity and bandwidth for, but really that idea of quality time, and probably accommodation too, which again I lacked in, but like how are you accommodating who's around you and who are they? Yeah, my mom's my mom, but she was also a woman. She, as people list off their titles, like mother, like she was a captain working in law enforcement or just whatever thing she was doing, like that's what she was also dealing with at the same time. And I'm just like, some of those things I couldn't even think of now, and I didn't look at you in that way and couldn't have, but you were that person in that moment. But all you were to me was my mom.
Mm,
I
yeah.
think a lot of that comes with growth, because with the example that you gave regarding your parents, your mom is your mom because you're 6 years old and you depend on mom for food and take me to basketball practice. And okay, mom, wake me up in the morning. Your mom is your mom because that's what she has presented herself to you as, right? But when you get older and you turn 24 and you realize, okay, well, my mom is not just my mom is an actual person because I'm going through the same things that she's going through. You wouldn't have been able to understand that as a child. So
Yeah.
a lot of that comes with growth and learning to uh, accept the fact that we do coexist. So
Yeah. Thanks, Robin. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us and for taking the time.
Absolutely. This is an amazing conversation. I really appreciated every single question. And I can want to definitely name I felt heard and seen in this space. There was a lot of listening and a lot of relativity. So thank you all for that.
I'll see you out on the metaphysical highway, my sister.
Absolutely. Yes, he will. And that's going to bring us someday out of the pandemic back into a physical space.
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
it's been a joy, Naya.
Absolutely. And we will speak soon.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Stay safe.
Yes, you too.
Be well. Well, we hope you enjoyed that riveting conversation and so much more metaphysical than I thought it was going to be. And I have to laugh because, man, maybe like sometime in April, like just as the pandemic was, really just sort of, we're all sort of setting in, realizing just how crazy it was. My daughter had approached me and said, like, I'm now the age that you were when I was born, and I like don't even know how you and mom did it. Like I can't even imagine having like a little baby with everything that's going on right now, like with the world the way it is. And so I was so right where she was when she was saying, indeed, because I remember for myself thinking when my daughter said that to me, thinking about my dad, and like, on the corner on a street corner, kneeling down in front of me saying, hey man, I gotta go. And I'm not sure when I'm gonna see you again, but I love you and it's not your fault. And then he got into like a 69 Camaro and like drove down the street. And it was like months before I got a chance to see him again, and I was the same age that he was. And I can't even imagine. So perception and she breathes that connection as a human being. It's so beautiful.
I agree. I think Naya is a very, very apt uh, human being. I am very proud to see another woman of color out there doing it, like just doing the damn thing. I'm so godly proud of her, and I don't even know her. This is my first time meeting her. I think the work that she's doing is awesome. I hope that she continues to take the footsteps that will lead her to become an influential person in our society, just as we were speaking in the beginning about Chadwick Boseman and Kamala Harris. I think that she is well on her way to influencing other people to be like her. So we have a charge every podcast that we do. So that is your charge, Naya. Continue to be an influencer, a positive influencer on this world.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Adam, we love you, man. You're the best, bro. My professor over there.
Thanks,
So if
Adam.
you like what you're hearing, everybody, please leave us some comments below and reach out to us, especially if you have somebody that you think that we should have on the show. You can see us on Facey Space and the Tweety Tweets at
Instagrammies.
Nysid. Tweety Tweets at Nysid. And the Instagrammy at Nysid improves lives __ improves lives. And we'll share with you down below all the information about how to take the love language survey and how to take the conflict management survey and information about Nayah's organization and all the incredible work that they're doing and how to reach out to them if you would like to have peer health exchange, do some sort of programming in your school. I'm sure that they would be interested in talking to you. So we love you all individually and as a group, and we will see you again.
Take care.
Peace and love.